This veteran of Nickelodeon for over 30 years has supposedly a lot of bad baggage. Hey guys, Blood Moon Bobby here, and I know I'm really late to this subject, but I really wanted to talk about it, especially with many of the changes going on at Nickelodeon with things like Butch Hartman leaving and Dan Schneider also walking away, which is probably for the better, but that's a totally different topic. But here's the really big bombshell that I just found out, although I've known about it for a few days, and that is Cyma Zarghami, the Nickelodeon president has stepped down. So yeah, she is stepping down. She started working in Nickelodeon in 1985 as a scheduling clerk, and she basically moved her way up the ladder. And in 1997, she became one of the four executive vice presidents and general manager. And in 2006, she became the president. And yeah, frankly, up until now, I didn't really know too much about Zarghami. I just kind of knew her name because I remember getting this book. I think it was called "They're Not Just Cartoons, They're Nicktoons." It was this book that showed artwork and these interviews that Nickelodeon had with its creators from at the time. It was going back from the Ren and Stimpy before John Christopher Lucy we found out was a dick, and then all the way up to the Mighty Bee, which is that Amy Poehler cartoon that nobody remembers. So that's basically how I know of her, I should say. I've never met her in person. And on one hand, I got to give her credit to sticking to Nickelodeon all these years. I always like hearing stories about people who are able to climb the executive ladder. As much as I often bash corporations and so forth in my line of work, I'll admit it is really impressive. I've likened it to when I heard the story of how Satoru Iwata, if you guys follow my gaming coverage, he went from being a programmer to HAL Laboratory, and then he went on to do management at Nintendo, and he became the very first president of Nintendo that was not part of the Yamauchi family, basically the founding family of Nintendo. So I always like hearing stories like that. But what's come out since her departure is that it turns out that Zarghami has been rather shady. And when you really think about it, when I started thinking about it, like 2006, in my opinion, was when Nickelodeon just started to go kind of going downhill and when they really started to pander to kids. Because prior to 2006, Nickelodeon shows were, they were still funny, but they were much more wacky, with shows like Rugrats, Cat Dog, Invader Zim, SpongeBob SquarePants to an extent, although that kind of leads me into my thoughts about where Nickelodeon got too corporate later on. But then after that, and I should also mention, just, a year before Zarghami took over, 2005, that was when Avatar came out, and that is easily the best Nicktoon that I've seen. I mean, I remember I really got involved in the plot. I used to be a big Katang shipper, and me and my dad, we used to just love like watching the show and following it. It was probably the first show I saw that had a continuous plot. It was like watching a movie that was split into TV episodes. But then after 2006, Nick just kind of really started pandering to kids. It had some really infamous shows like Fanboy and Chum Chum, Breadwinners. The Loud House came out in around, I think it was 2016 or 2017, which that's one of the better shows, but I still say it's a show that really panders, or I don't want to use the word pander, but it really aimed at it's at kids. It has a ton of like poop jokes and really just like run of the mill kind of kid show humor, and it has a lot of episodes that teach lessons. Now, admittedly, I've only seen much of the first season of The Loud House. I haven't seen the later seasons. I know, it breaks barriers in later episodes with things like it turns out how Lincoln's friend Clyde has two dads, and like it turns out that I heard the character Luna, it turns out, is bisexual. Like there's an episode called L is for Love, and that's all good, but aside from that, it seems like Nickelodeon really started breaking barriers aside, in terms of like the kinds of shows they would air, going back to like the Fanboy and Chum Chums and the Planet Sheens, it just really seemed like they started pandering to kids. And I have this statement that the rise and fall of Nickelodeon has got from Facebook. I know he had that famous interview with Pie Guy Rules where he was the first person to swear in a Pie Guy Rules video. But aside from that, this is the statement he got from this guy, Micah Wilson. Let me double check if I got it. He created Constant Pain. This guy, Micah Wright. Micah Wright. And it has a lot of damning evidence about Cyma, so I will go over it here in this video. Okay, so here is the statement that the rise and fall of Nickelodeon got from Micah Wright's Facebook page. So I quote, Cyma was the executive who A, killed my Nickelodeon action show in a fit of post 9/11 panic, claiming that action shows turn children to terrorists, and B, signed off on anti-union attacks on the 35 animation writers who had just signed their WGA cards and asked for pay equitable to our far less profitable live-action writer peers. For viewer, we were paid 1/6 to 1/10 of what the live-action writers were getting paid on much lower-rated shows. Under Cyma's leadership, Nickelodeon illegally harassed the pro-union writers, then illegally fired or laid off 30 of the troublemakers, lied in federal court to obtain the names of the unionizing ringleaders, then blacklisted 4 of us, including me, by calling every animation house in Los Angeles and telling them not to hire us. Then signed a deal with the IATSE, Local 839 Animation Union, locking the Writers Guild out of Nickelodeon forever, and only then did Nickelodeon eventually hire back many of the unionist writers and writer/board artists, once they made sure they'd never have to pay any animation writer a single dollar in residuals on cartoons, never mind the fact that the composers of our cartoons and the actors in our cartoons get paid residuals. During Cyma's regime, the methodology of paying show creators also quietly changed. Creators used to get 2% of adjusted gross of toys, bedsheets, plush animals, etc. based on their shows. This meant that Nickelodeon could deduct the cost of toy manufacture and shipping to the stores and nothing else. Then perhaps upset about having to pay millions of dollars to Steven Hillenburg, creator of SpongeBob, Cyma's Nickelodeon quietly changed their creator deals to adjusted net of toy revenue, meaning they could deduct the cost of anything they wanted from the earnings of their creators. Cyma mentioned your show during dinner for $6 at the French Laundry. I'm guessing that's a restaurant. That's $3,000 deduced from your creator payments. They've also held the line on what they pay artists and creators on a per-episode basis, from what I hear. It's not unusual for a show creator at Nickelodeon to work 60 to 80-hour weeks for less money per week they would have earned 15 years ago, even as the cost of living has dramatically gone up. And why? All to disguise the falling ratings. Because the ratings are so low, the earnings from ad sales are low, so to provide profits, you have to slash your employees' paychecks, healthcare, retirement funds, etc. Also, more money can be funneled upward to the executives in charge, to the shareholders, to anyone but the artists who create the work. Perhaps not coincidentally, during these 17 years since I left Nickelodeon, they haven't had a single hit approaching the success of SpongeBob. After all, if you're a creator of a great show and you have another opinion which would pay you a real percentage of the toy money, why wouldn't you make it? Nickelodeon has spent the last decade treating creators terribly, like when Carl Greenblatt and his staff on Harvey Beaks, when their show and jobs have been canceled via tweet. And to kind of go off the quote for a second, I did hear about what happened to CJ Greenblatt, and he basically made a Tumblr post saying he was disappointed and Nickelodeon forced him to write an apology. You could check out the video on Pie Guy Rules channel to see what was up with that. Recently, Cyma's Nickelodeon had their biggest recent animation success taken out at the knees by a hashtag MeToo firing that every single person at the studio saw building for years. Worse, she recently had to terminate Nickelodeon's relationship with Dan Schneider, the live-action series creator who single-handedly kept Nickelodeon on the air for 10 years, terminating him because of swirling rumors of sexual predation of their minor actresses, rumors which the Me Too movement made far more likely to emerge into public view and make Viacom's cash cow network synonymous with child molestation. And all of this as Cyma watched haplessly while Nickelodeon's ratings slid off a cliff, routinely getting 1/3 of what their shows used to get. She spent years blaming Netflix, the internet, video games, voodoo, anything, then take a serious look at how they choose their shows and ran their house. When I started at Nickelodeon, the executives loved animation and loved creativity and didn't want to make anything that looked like something someone else would make. The network thrived and grew from number 87 in the ratings to become the number 1 channel in cable television. Then the executive leadership changed and the channel became about cutting corners, doing everything on the cheap, chiseling away at artists' pay, and most especially about selling toys to kids, and aping whatever cartoons everyone else was already doing. Cyma turned away Adventure Time for just one example. They turned down Phineas and Ferb for another example, the channel which nurtured weird shows like Real Monsters, Invader Zim, SpongeBob SquarePants, The Angry Beavers, and Hey Arnold because the channel which bought and rebooted stale old intellectual properties like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and spent millions trying to develop ancient nonsense like Mighty Mouse. Once upon a time, we challenged number 1 network, the Disney Channel, and their lazy culture of using money and acquisitions to compensate for lack of creativity, which, going off quote again, I could easily say similar things about Disney Channel. Well, but that's kind of more problems with Disney proper as a company. Under Cyma's leadership, Nickelodeon became the Disney Channel with their hidebound development process, fear of the unknown, and over reliance on being the second person with a good idea. And the Disney Channel hired away many of the old school Nick execs and reinvented itself, not completely. It's still Disney after all, but they're far more experimental than Nick at this point. Which, again, going off quote, I agree, but Disney proper just needs to market those shows better. It's never a fun thing to see someone be fired, but I can't bring myself to feel sorry for her because I'm sure she's walking out the door with millions of dollars weaseled out of the pockets of series creators and animation artists. And I can't help suspect that she did much of the same with the live action creators and crews, although less so because they're protected by much stronger unions than animators. The free fall ratings alone should have gotten her fired a decade ago, and the failure of their development department to produce anything my kids want to watch should have been the final nail in her coffin. But this is America, where the little guy gets fired and blacklisted, and the wealthy elite can only ever fail upward. It'll be interesting to see what happens next. They've got an opportunity here to completely reinvent the network and re-embrace creativity and originality. Anyone want to lay odds that they'll ever do that? Can they even do it at this point? Okay, so after I read the quote, I decided to write a couple more notes down. So let's go from there. So first of all, let me just make it clear, even though, yeah, I came from Michael Wright's Facebook, we got to still keep in mind this is speculation. I mean, is Micah Wright correct? We probably will never know, especially since this is more internal stuff that goes on. And, my, experience in covering, because I've looked into things like how there was speculation that Ubisoft, the video game developer, treated its employees very badly, and the speculation with Konami. These kind of things, companies are either not going to comment on, or at best they'll give some kind of defensive response, saying stuff like, oh, that's not true, that's not true. I mean, the only way you're going to know it's true is if you've had experience working at Nickelodeon in this case. But I definitely think there's a sliver of truth with a lot of what Micah had to say. Most notably, things like how, let's go back to the top where Cyma or Zarghami, I should say last names in journalism, basically told Wright that we're not going to greenlight your show because action cartoons turn kids into terrorists. And while I'm definitely, I'm on the boat with many of you guys. That's not true. I've watched action cartoons all my life. Many of my friends are also cartoon fans. We never ever wanted to commit an act of terrorism. Okay, when we see like fights on the news or terrorist attacks, they terrorize us. They scare us. We don't want to commit those kind of things. We watch these cartoons because they're fun and sometimes they reflect on us. Now does that mean I want to be like Aang and I want to go do some airbending? No. Even if I tried learning Kung Fu, I'd suck. I mean, I know I tried learning karate and that was not a very good experience. But I definitely see a lot of that in, Nickelodeon, especially when you consider, how many of their shows are like action shows, you know, or even have like very gross moments. You could basically count them on your one hand. The three that or four that come to mind to me the most are shows like Hake Invader Zim, Avatar, Danny Phantom, and The X's, which I don't really care that The X's is a lesser known cartoon these days. I thought it was still a lot of fun. But I definitely see that a lot, especially with like the vast majority of Nick shows that they air today, and even in the last decade, are mainly comedy shows, and occasionally they went gruesome without realizing it with disgusting disasters like pig, goat, banana, cricket. So I definitely see a sliver of that truth, like especially after Zarghami took over as president. And I even think it's not that she feels that way. Like I'm pretty sure she knows that like action cartoons don't turn to kids and serious. It's a PR thing, It's where she's basically saying I don't want to greenlight this because if a stupid parent says your action show turned my kid violent, she doesn't want to be responsible for that. And you know what I'm saying? So I think that's where it comes from. And then the thing that probably the hardest hitting thing that to come out of Wright's statement was when he said that the Nickelodeon, especially animators, get underpaid. Like he said that they would get paid much less than the live action people that will work on their live action shows. And also, like he said, a show creator could work 60 to 80-hour weeks and be paid less than they were 15 years ago. If that's true, then it's just, I mean, especially with how, when you look at Nickelodeon nowadays, much of it is about the live action shows. Even if you go to Nickelodeon's sister channel, Nicktoons, they still air a lot of live action shows like I've seen on their schedule. They've aired Henry Danger and Game Shakers on the Nicktoons channel. It used to be called Nicktoons Network, but it's still the same thing, So, I mean, it definitely sounds, like there's a bit of truth, at least in terms of how Nickelodeon doesn't seem to care about their animators much. And with how, like, greedy, a lot of these corporate bosses are, obviously she took, if she did take a bigger paycheck or her, her goons, the suits at Nick took bigger paychecks, part of it is because, they don't really care about the animators. And also I feel a big part of it is because, executives want money. It's just as simple as that. He even mentioned in the last messages that he thinks that Zarghami is probably leaving Nickelodeon with a golden parachute. And, and I've watched videos from this one guy that I won't mention because his trolls are ferocious. But, he said, this YouTuber in the past has said that, corporate bosses, in order to be let go, they have to be paid, potentially millions of dollars, so they leave the company, whether they do a good job or not, with enough so that even if they can't find another job, which I'm pretty sure, Zarghami can, they don't have to work another day in their lives, So I think that's that. And I have to, this part, I think it's for certain. This is probably the more opinion-ish side of what Micah said, where he said Nickelodeon became the Disney Channel because it became super corporate. And yeah, I kind of have to agree with that. Not just, the Disney Channel, because even like, Disney Channel, Disney XD, they have their creative shows, shows like Star Wars, The Force of Evil, Gravity Falls, Wander Over Yonder, DuckTales. I've heard really good things about this new show called Big City Greens, you know, but I could relate to that in terms of, you've seen me talk bash Disney a lot, in terms of how they only like to market, things that they know or certain that are going to make big money. And I'm kind of hoping with Solo underperforming at the box office that it shows Disney that even if you're too safe, what are you going to do if one of your potential money makers bombs at the box office? So, but that's a topic for another video I'll save for another time. But I definitely see that. Although in the case of Nickelodeon, I've seen their TV ads where they really pander with things like memes. There are ads where SpongeBob goes on Instaclam, or I even heard they did like a Dang Daniel reference where they can't even use the term Damn Daniel. And remember that song, Watch Me Whip, Watch Me Nay Nay was popular. There was the Wee Wee Dance. I saw the commercial in Velasquez Bum and Phantom Strider's videos. I mean, it's just the signs of a super corporate company. And as much as I bash on Disney, and even Micah was saying that he thinks Disney has now surpassed, just get like Disney has surpassed Nickelodeon. Okay, I'll start from here. The Disney has surpassed Nickelodeon. I definitely think even like, corporate Disney, it still has its creative shows like the ones I mentioned before. If you like look at my wall right now, you notice that I'll probably do another shot, but I've got post a fan made poster of Gravity Falls. If you're the creator, please let me know who you are in my description. There's I've got screenshots from Star Wars: The Force of Evil. I've got a screenshot from regular show. I've got a Garnet figurine that will not stand up, and I wish Garnet would. And it's just, notice how like I have screenshots from Disney XD and Cartoon Network's current shows. I mean, granted, regular show has ended, but it's still a relevant series in my opinion. And part of it is because they're very creative shows. They may take inspiration from pop culture of especially the 80s, but they are definitely their own thing. Regular show was probably the first really surreal cartoon I got into. And Star vs. The Force of Evil, you may think is mainly for a female demographic, but its story and drama wraps in, pretty much anybody of any gender, And in the case of Nickelodeon, I've got behind me, again, I'll show you it in better detail, poster from Avatar. Like I said, I consider that the last Nickelodeon show that I really, really got into. Not that there aren't good Nickelodeon shows now. Like I said, I like but don't love The Loud House. No, but it's just that nowadays it just seems like because, Nickelodeon's ratings, are falling, at least according to Micah, which, I know part of it is because of the cable cutting. Like, even me personally, as a kid, I used to watch Nickelodeon shows when I could through VHS tapes. And nowadays, I'm doing it through Kiss Cartoon, or I'm even downloading episodes through Google Play or iTunes, I mean, part of it is that too. We always talk about it in the cartoon industry. But the thing about it is just that Nickelodeon just doesn't have anything, super relevant and fun anymore. And me personally, I know I've heard that SpongeBob episodes have gotten better, but I wasn't even a SpongeBob fan when it was in its prime. Even when I was 5 years old, I thought it was just a really weird show. True, some of the episodes are kind of cool. Like I remember seeing one where he goes to visit Sandy the first time and he's drying up, but it's really not my cup of tea compared to shows like Rugrats, Invader Zim, or Avatar. So I think that's just it. Nickelodeon just went super corporate. I even remember Saber Spark had a quote from the creator of Hey Arnold, Craig Bartlett, where Bartlett basically said every year Nickelodeon just got more corporate and corporate and corporate, and the more established Nickelodeon became, it became corporate because it felt that it was the only way they were just going to keep going. and now it really only has two, maybe three shows. I haven't seen Welcome to the Wing yet, but I heard the last of them say it's a really good show that are good, but they can't really compete with the likes of Cartoon Network and Disney XD, in my opinion, you know? So I just really hope now that, even though I liked, Danny Phantom, now that Butch Hartman is gone, Dan Schneider is gone, and now Cyma Zarghami have stepped out, I just really hope that Nickelodeon can, maybe not, like, I'm not saying they have to repeat the success they had in the past, which they are doing, like, they had the Hey Arnold Jungle movie, which was pretty heartwarming, and they're also coming out with movies based on Rocco's Modern Life and Hey Arnold, and that's good. What I'm saying is they just need to find really good creative talent. And Cartoon Network is doing that right now. Like, they just greenlit Infinity Train, and Apple and Onion is now a TV series, and I've watched a couple episodes of that, and it was a lot of fun. So I don't think Nickelodeon needs to rehash what they did in the 90s. Like, I think any company, because I even complain when like companies like Nintendo are like, look at these like, amazing games we did back in the NES and Super Nintendo days. Like, it's good to have like a company remember not forget its roots, but it's also important for them to try new things. Much like Cartoon Network and Disney XD have been doing. I'm not against the idea of Nickelodeon bringing something new. I definitely think they can. And funny enough, it just came to mind. Gabby showed me this pilot for this show called, let me look it up because I know the name of the main character. If I can just look that up. I may even put in a clip to show you guys. It is Someone Needs to Stomp on Phyllis, and it was amazing. I love that. It was probably the funniest thing I've seen come from Nickelodeon in a really long time.
Oh, hey, Aunt Phyllis. Are you getting a midnight snack too? Shoo.
You have this show where this kind of dim-witted, if good-natured aunt is like, getting into things like she's wearing a flower to attract bees. She doesn't want her niece to go away, so she basically kidnaps her. I mean, this really kind of edgy humor. I'm just like, I want to see Nickelodeon do that. I don't just want to see them do the really safe stuff. I don't want to see them back in the days where they dropped Adventure Time in favor of Fanboy and Chum Chum. I want to see them do new things. That's because that's the constant thing we're seeing. I mean, I would even argue Nickelodeon, in a sense, has planted the seeds for where they put in a much more involved plot and a much more mature story. Like when they first brought Avatar out back in 2005. And now we have shows like Adventure Time, like Star vs. the Forces of Evil, that take on, relatively mature subject matter and have very involved stories, but kids can also follow them just as well, So I think if Nickelodeon can definitely greenlight shows like turn, Someone Needs to Stop on Phyllis into a legit show, then they can go into a much more creative direction. And I think they have a lot of potential. They've shown it in the past, and they can definitely do it in the future. Just like we've seen the other cartoon channels have done it. Because, to be fair, Cartoon Network and Disney were in their own slumps for a while. And I didn't really even consider Disney a place to watch cartoons when I was a kid. And now I've got into Disney XD, and I've even discovered they've had a really great past. I'd like to see shows like DuckTales, Darkwing Duck, and Gargoyles, which I really want to do a video on because I've heard Jordan Peele tried to pitch a Gargoyles movie to Disney and they turned it down, but that's a story for another video, but I really want to do a video on that. So if Nickelodeon, now that it's basically entering into a new era, basically the post-Zarghami era, I'm hoping that they can go down more creative avenues. So let's hope they do. So alright, this has been Bloodmoon Bobby. How do you personally feel about this? Are you glad or are you sad that Cyma Zarghami is leaving? Do you believe these posts from the rise and fall of Nickelodeon and Micah Wright. Please let me know if you have any more information. If you would like to correct me, please do so in the comments. If you would like to pitch a story to me relating to Nickelodeon or cartoons, you can email me. My email address is down below in the description. You're not going to know where I live. And thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all later. Hey guys, this has been a Blood Moon Bobby video. Please like this video or dislike it, and please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.